product, we all agree that we should delight our users, right? I mean, every time I talk to product leaders or founders, they all use the same word. We need to delight our users. The problem is, and here's the truth, they don't know how. I mean, they use it as a word because it sounds like interesting, but the reality is they don't know how. And product delight is actually about creating products that honor for both emotional and functional needs at the same time, so you can create that loyalty and that connection that make people stick.
When we say delight, there are industries like healthcare, there are industries like banking, and the first thought is how can one bring delight to that? So what are the most common misconceptions that you have come across when it comes to delight, and how can teams integrate this factor into their products?
So there are common several misconceptions. The first one, I think people are very knowledgeable about the framework called Kano. And Kano came with this concept of must-have, performance, and delight. So the very first time I heard about the word delight in product was from Kano model, which is a lovely, by the way, framework. The problem is that people are taking it as a prioritization tool. They are thinking that delight will come after performance and performance will come after must-have. Never get to delight. I mean, if you do that kind of prioritization, you will never get to delight.
Looking at the years ahead, what would success look like in an industry if the industry embraced the delight framework? We make delight as core part of product management. Where do you think would be the biggest for us?
So there is I'm not sure if it's a famous quote or not, but for me it's a really interesting quote from Jeff Bezos. He said something quite interesting. He actually said that I'm very much asked about what will change in the next 10 years or so. And he said I rarely get asked what will remain in the next 10 years. And he then said, I believe that the second question is much more important, because if we put our efforts into the second, it's worth it. We invest on things that remain, because it's so worth it. And so in that sense, I believe that people's emotion is something that has existed and will exist for ages and years. So it's really worth investing into doing that, and the benefit will come for sure.
Hi all, welcome to the Priceless Conversation, the podcast where we navigate the art and science of product management, pricing, automation, and AI. We do this with a mix of wit and some dashboard war related stories. I'm Satya. I'm a scientist who found her way in the world of AI and product. And I still use research, data, and a lot of domains to connect dots to solve problems.
And I'm Amit. I work in product and pricing, helping teams decide what to build and how to charge for it. I ask the hard questions and share lessons from the field. I'm glad you're tuning in today. Our guest today is a globally renowned product coach and expert. She's an author. She's got a decade of experience with the big companies, Google, Spotify, and Microsoft. And she has a background in research. She did a PhD from Bell Labs in UCLA, and she brings deep technical expertise to human-centered product design. For those of you who've known Skype, which was the precursor to Teams these days, and Google Meet and Chrome, I would like to welcome Nesrine Changuel. Hi, Nesrine.
Hi, thanks for having me. Excited for this chat.
We are delighted to have you.
Thank you.
So let's kickstart, Nesrine. So you are known for product delight. You are known for the work that you have done across different products and bringing out the factor of product delight. And I want to listen from the OG itself is what is product delight? What makes it different to the product that simply is, it simply is solving problems, but also from the one that also creates product delight.
Okay, so let me try to get into the concrete explanation and definition of delight. When we use products, we use them for different reasons, right? And sometimes we don't even recognize that we use them for different reasons, but the reality is that we go to the same product for different reasons sometimes. And these reasons could be functional because we want to accomplish a task. Like I want to book a flight. I want to listen to music. These are functional needs. But sometimes we go to certain products as well for some emotional needs. So it's really important to recognize that there are two motivators or two different area of needs that user might have in using our product. Let's use Spotify, for example. Like you might go to Spotify to listen to a specific track. This is a functional need, but also sometimes you go to Spotify because you want to feel less lonely. You want to put some music, some vibe. You want to get productive. You want to change your mood. These are also other way of using the product. So what we really want to achieve is actually to build products that serve for those two different needs, not only the functional one, but we want to also provide features and solutions that will honor those emotional needs at the same time. And if you manage to do so, you create what we call emotional connection. You want to create that emotional connection between your product and your users, because this is what will create loyalty. This is what will make your users stay. They will even talk about your product. They will be ambassadors. So that's the theory of emotional connection. Now, I call this in product delight, because in product, we all agree that we should delight our users, right? I mean, every time I talk to product leaders or founders, they all use the same word. We need to delight our users. The problem is, and here's the truth, they don't know how. I mean, they use it as a word because it sounds like interesting, but the reality is they don't know how. And product delight is actually about creating products that honor for both emotional and functional need at the same time, so you can create that loyalty and that connection that make people stick, and more importantly, talk about your product.
Nesrine, wonderful. And, we've been talking a lot about how to delight for our users. And just to be sure, you're not talking about only those products. You spoke a little bit about emotionally helpful, and these are not those only the product that help you in mental well-being, but all the category of products. And I think they all should have some sort of a delight factor.
Yes.
And these products, so you've grown up in Paris, and so what were the early product that you remember that you felt genuinely delighted in your growing up days?
I'm gonna share an example, but before I get to that example, I want to just highlight, we spoke about what is delight. I just want to add one more thing, which is what is not delight. And I have a feeling that when I talk about delight, the problem is most people believe in delight as that sparkle or those emojis or these confettis. And this is not necessarily the delight I'm talking about. I mean, this is usually what designers are good at bringing. Yes. However, the delight I'm here for is like you need to bring delight in the core experience, not only in the way how you design your product. I mean, we will get deep into that. And the best example, because you asked about example, is something that I actually had a personal and a professional attachment to, where in my very early days, when I studied electrical engineering, I had to leave my home country and I traveled for the first time. And I'm talking about more than 22 years ago. And you know what? At that time, we had no choice for having international calls other than
Skype.
Of course.
Of course, Skype.
I
That
think you
was
have
the
been through that
lingua.
hustle. I mean, it's terrible. Like if you want to do phone calls, it is so much expensive. Like honestly. So I used Skype in my very, very early days. And I remember how joyful it was. Of course, it was a way to stay connected with my families and friends and loved ones. But also it was a way, I remember Skype by its iconic blue. It's like a playful, and also like even the characteristic ringtone, or that, I mean, it's all part of the brand. It's part of the personality of the product. So for me, Skype, even if it's like super old time ago now, it is one of those pioneer into putting in place the emotional connection, because it's more than a product. It's something that we connect with on an emotional level. And I love, like every time I talk about Skype, people are sharing their stories about how they met their spouse or their best friend through Skype back then. So it happened, and of course it happens that I worked for Skype a couple of years later. But the fun part is that when I worked for Skype, the very first feature that we introduced was group video call. It's an age revealer, but it's something that has been growing and making a lot of impact on people's life. So that's probably the first example that comes to my mind that is a pure emotional connection example.
As you have been moving from countries and also experienced different cultures, one question is delight universal to the age, to the cultures, to the industries as well?
So delight is an emotion. So when we talk about delight, there are two types of definition. There is a theoretical definition and there is a practical definition. The theoretical definition has been introduced in a very deep study by Professor Bulchik, who actually said that delight is a combination of two emotions. So think about it for a moment. Delight is a combination of joy and surprise. If you are in a moment where you are at the same time experiencing joy and surprise, you are delighted. So that's the foundation. Foundation is delight is an emotion. So we need to work on how can we leverage that emotion. Now, the practical side is to put that into product or into, like, by the way, you can put it anywhere. Like even in food, we talk about how we bring emotions into the plates, etc. Product particularly, we need to do three key main things. The first one, in order to achieve delight, you need to remove friction. The second is you need to exceed users' expectation. And the third, you need to anticipate their needs. You anticipate your need, you're surprising them. You exceed their expectation, you're bringing them joy. And you remove friction, you're making the experience wonderful. So that's the foundation of delight. Now you asked about, is it universal? Since it's emotion, emotions are universal, right? I mean, we can't say it will work in a country and won't work somewhere else, or it will work for a product and not for another product. So I've got this question like, is delight a B2C thing? Does it has any space in the B2B? And my answer is always the same. If the user of your product are a human being, they're human using the product, then they deserve their emotion to be honored and like taken into account seriously. So I usually advocate for B2H, which is business to human rather than B2B or B2C or whatever. So yes, it's universal. Yes, it's across industries and across product. The only thing is they have to take it with caution. I mean, you can't just go with emotion. I mean, you can do mistakes. We can talk about mistakes later, but let's keep positive things for now.
I think let's wrap up the mistakes already, because when we say delight, there are industries like healthcare, there are industries like banking, and the first thought is how can one bring delight to that? So, what are the most common misconceptions that you have come across when it comes to delight, and how can team integrate this factor into their products?
So there are common several misconceptions. The first one, I think people are very knowledgeable about the framework called Kano. And Kano came with this concept of must-have, performance, and delight. So the very first time I heard about the word delight in product was from Kano model, which is a lovely, by the way, framework. The problem is that people are taking it as a prioritization tool. They are thinking that delight will come after performance and performance will come after must-have. Never get to delight. I mean, if you do that kind of prioritization, you will never get to delight. So that's the first mistake. And the second thing is that since Kano did not explain exactly what delight is, they usually confuse delight with those, remember, the confetti effect that I call, like confetti effect is like, okay, let's add some Easter egg here and some confetti here and my product will be delightful. But this is absolutely not what we want to talk about today. What we want to talk about today is when I'm building a functionality or a feature, how can I build it in a way that I'm taking into consideration the emotional need of my product or my users, so I make it like a deep delight. So that's more or less what the biggest mistake is. Like they take it as a nice to have, is an aesthetic thing, but it's a must-have for differentiation, and that's what I've seen in most of the product I've been building. The other mistake, it's not really a mistake, but it's something that can go wrong, is that you remember I told you like delight is an emotion, and we need to take care of those emotions. We should surprise them in a positive way, not a negative way. So inclusion in that sense is extremely important. It's even more important than any other area. Why? Because what pleased me is not necessarily what pleased you. Even myself, what's make me happy today is not necessarily what will make me happy in a week. So we need to make sure that whatever delightful feature we're bringing, we are bringing it in a way that is inclusive and doesn't bring harm to anyone. plenty of examples that way. Like, for example, when we introduced in Google Meet, I've been working Google Meet for many years, and I remember there was a time where Apple actually made an update for their OS, and they enabled this gesture reaction, and suddenly
Yes.
this you have like fireworks, and it's supposed to be, of course, a delightful moment. By the way, it's an Apple update, not a Google Meet update. Just want to highlight that because we had a lot of requests saying we want to get rid of that. It's like just enable that feature in your system. But what's the problem? The problem is that many people have been having a call with their therapist showing a hurt finger. And what happened? Like, you're in the therapist in a terrible moment and fireworks, like what an appropriate time to have fireworks. And like it had a bad press around that. So take emotions with caution and make sure that it's inclusive in all senses.
That's very well put. I think it's a very good example also, because we just try to put everything as a universal aspect and not include a lot of case scenarios.
So I understand the delight aspect a bit better now. But then, as a business, how do businesses measure the delight quotient? And we don't want to go through that route of Kano model, where delight is the last version of your product feature, but the first one that would make the user happy. How do we bring that from not a nice to have feature to a must have aspect? And after we build it, how do we measure?
Yeah. So as a business, of course, we care about several things. And most of the time, we care about growth, we care about revenues, of course, we care about retaining our users, we care about their loyalty so that they come back. And the good news is that if you invest in delight is a multiplier or even a driver for the growth of all the metrics I just told you about, like revenue, growth, retention, word of mouth. They are all positively impacted by creating emotional connection with your users. So that's the very first good news. Now, the question is, how can I put that in place? And how can I make sure that I prioritize it? And here I want to highlight something. We need to shift our mindset from delight versus functionality, or functionality versus delight, into how can I get delight in functionality? I mean, I really want to make sure that people understand this point. It's not a competition. If you compete, for sure functionality will take over. I mean, for sure. But how can we shift our mindset into this delight in functionality? So let me explain one thing. There are 3 types of delight, and I highlighted that in my writing, where I say there's surface delight, there's deep delight, there's low delight. Remember, I said something in the beginning of this podcast. I said the very first thing you have to do is to identify emotional motivators and functional motivators. Let's imagine you did that. You have a list. You have a list of emotional motivators and you have a list of functional motivators. Now, you will look at all the features you have in your backlog, or you take one feature and say, this feature, does it solve for any of these emotional motivators or any of these functional motivators? If it solves only for one or a couple of functional motivators, then it belongs to this, I call it low delight category. I mean, of course, it's important because it will make the user's life maybe easier, but it's low delight. If the feature, okay, it's best to give an example here before we move to the second type. If the feature, let's say, is skip at Spotify, you're on Spotify, you want to skip a song to another. It's all functional, right? There's no emotion particular. So that's an example of low delight, and it's a must-have. It has to be there. However, if the feature is only solving for one of the emotional motivator only, there is no functionality at all. That's called surface delight. And the best example maybe I can share here is Wrapped. Like Wrapped, this end of year retrospective that you get, where we tell you like what you've been listening to toward the entire year. There's nothing functional, and people love it because it says something about how cool they were like throughout the year. They want to share it with their friends, and that's surface delight. The deep delight is when you have a solution that is solving for both, let's say a functional need and an emotional need at the same time. Take Discover Weekly, for example. Discover Weekly allows people to discover a new song, which is probably a functional need, but do it in a personalized way that makes it like functional level 2. So these are the deep delight,
Yeah.
and maybe of surface delight. Don't get me wrong. I'm not here to say like you need to put a lot of surface delight. Surface delight is the one. Like, by the way, I came with a model called 50, 40, 10, which 50% of your roadmap should be for low delight, 40% for deep delight, and 10% for surface delight. So that's maybe the guidance I would like to recommend people, is to look at their roadmap and see, is it 100% low delight today? Okay, no problem. How can I look at those features that you're about to build? How can I change them a little bit so that I also take into consideration the emotional needs into it?
Probably have a delight meter,
Yes.
onto that feature. That okay, yeah, this is 70% delight. This is 20% delight. This is a surface delight. I think that's wonderful. How you've captured how so surface delight, deep delight, and bridging that to functional and emotional requirements. That helps in understanding, how can you use it in our frameworks, in our roadmaps, or in our day to day. I think there could also be usage of delight in the post deployment product. When you talk about acquisition, when you talk about awareness, retention sort of thing, when you want to talk about retaining customers, and then measure were the delight features helped you retain the customers, or was it something else, or whether the deep delight features helped you retain customers, or whether it was surface delight like the year end you spoke about. Do you think some of the usage of this delight in a double A triple R framework, or any other, after you've created the roadmap?
Yes. So I don't think like you can say like the surface delight contributed in X percentage in my North Star metrics and versus deep delight or whatever. What we are trying to build here is like we are trying to build trust, and we're trying to build this emotional connection, and it takes time. So you, for example, if I tell you from Spotify perspective, I don't know if the loyalty comes more from the wrapped feature, or it comes more from like the collaborative playlist, or it comes more from, I mean, it's really hard. However, it is possible to measure the impact or the delight impact of every feature. And for example, at Google, we measure that a lot. We had even a specific survey or metric that measure happiness. It's called HATS, or Happiness Tracking Survey. Like HATS stands for Happiness Tracking Survey. So happiness tracking survey is a metric that we look at, and we measure the happiness, as it says, of our users while using the product. So that's a very, let's say, tier 3 metric. But then we try to connect and correlate this metric into our, let's say, business metrics. Does the HADS metric has any impact on retention, on adoption, on churn, on revenues? And we try to see if there's any connection. Of course, there will be a connection. The only thing is that it takes time. It's not like by the time you implement a delightful feature that next quarter you will see a bump in the retention or the adoption. It just takes time. It's something that you build. It's like you're planting seeds into the user's mind so that they end up loving you and they just want to use more of your product and stay longer with you. And by the way, since we're talking about that, I was pinged yesterday on a LinkedIn post that I really loved. Someone posted like there was a PM from Buffer, and Buffer is this company that help people with social media, etc. And it's more for B2B. And they did something for me, a pure delightful thing that may not come to your mind as an example of delight, but I loved it. Actually, what they said is that we actually looked at our data and we found out that there are about 10% of our users subscribing and paying us, they're not using the products. So we understand that mistakes happen, and we don't want to charge those people. I mean, they might just have forgotten to cancel their subscription. So they reached out with a long email. Of course,
Wonderful.
losing money, and they even put how much money they lost on that. But when you get such a message from a company, probably you might
Oh,
even think, I want to get back to you. I mean, nice.
yeah, I that's so wonderful. People genuinely being nice. Interestingly, I had another similarly experience with Notion, where I added a collaborator, and for some reason I added them as a user. I realized it in the day, and then I move them back as a guest. So in Notion, if you can have a one-person plan, and then when you add another member, your cost increases. But Notion was so good, they said, hey, we will refund you because you added it accidentally.
Yeah.
And that's made me a fan of Notion for a while now.
It's these small touches sometimes, and also especially when you have that bad emotion and you're expecting things to go wrong, and suddenly they just go much easier than expected. And I have another example recently from Uber. So I was thinking or asking for an Uber going to train station. And honestly, I was in a rush. Like I was stressed about missing my train to London. So I asked for a driver. And what happened is that after a few minutes, the driver canceled. Like he was on the way coming to my place, but then he canceled. Like within the stress, I just thought about thinking another solution. Like, hey, it happens that there was a taxi passing in front of my place, so I jumped into that taxi and forgot about the Uber thing. The story is that actually Uber, when the first driver canceled, started looking for another driver for me, and the other driver came, and he started waiting for me. He couldn't find me. I was not even on my app, so he charged me twice. He charged for the waiting, he charged for the trip that I did not took. I was really angry, like angry about myself, angry about the app. I was stressed. I mean, I was all in negative emotion that we don't want our users to be. So I was prepared mentally to write an email to Uber, explain. I was like, and he didn't came. And you know what happens? In my train, I opened the app and it said claim a refund. It's like, which trip do you want to get claim refund? This one. Not even a single explanation of why. And Bing, your money is being refunded. That's exceeding expectation by far. And that's also why I was like, now I think I will, next time I will just think about Uber, because I mean, there's a less of a stress by asking for your rights.
All your examples actually highlight that delight can also be at a small scale and also at a large scale, because Uber have millions of users and they were still able to achieve that delight.
Yeah.
So there's the entire product life cycle. There are many functions that are involved to create the product, develop the product, release the product. How, or do you have any structure or framework that how can cross-functional collaboration sustain product delight across the product life cycle?
Yeah. Let me be, maybe that's something that is not new for you, but when I started this project of delight, I actually realized that delight and emotional connection are not new concepts. These are extremely familiar concepts for designers, and these are also quite familiar concepts for marketers. In design, you have plenty of great resources about emotional design or designing for emotions. These are great books that I, by the way, recommend. And designers are extremely knowledgeable about how to design for emotion. Same for marketers. Marketers, think about the best marketing campaign are those who rely on emotion. Think about how Coca-Cola are doing their marketing campaigns. This is something that has been successful for ages now. The problem is, when we talk about emotional connection, this is completely unfamiliar for business and for products. And what happened is that you have designers talking about emotion, you have marketers talking about emotions, and in between, managers and business are I have no idea what you're talking about. What are you talking about? And that creates a gap. Gaps in communication, gaps in cross-functional collaborations. So it was really important to first bring that vocabulary to the business, to the product, to the engineer, so that they understand, make it feasible and actionable through a model. That's why I developed the Delight model, which is a 4-step model where you can implement Delight into your products. And it also help and facilitate that communication with marketers and designers to make sure that we achieve the same goal. We agree that the goal is to create that emotional connection because that's what will make our product win, and that's how we can differentiate ourselves. So let's agree and make sure that we're aligned. That was the start of the project, is to make sure that people are speaking the same language for the most beautiful goal.
So, looking at the years ahead, what would success look like in an industry if the industry embraced the Delight framework. We make Delight as a core part of product management. Where do you think would be the biggest for us?
So there is I'm not sure if it's a famous quote or not, but for me, it's a really interesting quote from Jeff Bezos. He said something quite interesting. He actually said that I'm very much asked about what will change in the next 10 years or so. And he said, I rarely get asked what will remain in the next 10 years. And he then said, I believe that the second question is much more important because if we put our efforts into the seconds, it's worth it. We invest on things that remain because, it's so worth it. And so, in that sense, I believe that people's emotion is something that has existed and will exist for ages and years. So it's really worth investing into doing that, and the benefit will come for sure. Now, with the evolving technologies and things are changing around us, particularly with the spread of AI, we see that AI is helping people to improve functionality. Like it's really easier now to build products in days. We can get prototypes in hours. So the functionality part is evolving, is getting easier, it's getting faster. And that's a risk. Because if we start only to improve and fasten the functional part and we don't focus on the emotional part, we're just getting into a robotic world. So that's why I do believe that's even more important now to invest and talk about this emotional connection part so that we catch up with the improvement we're doing on the functional part. We really need to be side by side, like emotional needs and functional needs to be aligned. So AI will take care of the functional part. Let's be, as human, take care of the emotional part so that we build a more delightful world.
I really like the way you say about, let AI take care of functionality and we take care of the emotions part.
Yeah, because let me give you an example. I worked for Google Chrome for a couple of years. And when I worked for Google Chrome, I had to work on one of the biggest challenge of Chrome, or I think the biggest challenge for any browser, by the way, which is managing tabs. Like people are managing tabs in a complete weird and sometimes like unexpected way. People leave tabs open as a reminder or as a I don't care or as a forgotten. And especially on mobile, when we look at data, we have so many tabs open on mobile. I'm pretty sure my dad would have like 500 or something. Like it's just insane sometimes. And we started looking at that as a functional problem because as an app, you don't want to have people having 500 tabs open. It takes time, it takes space, it takes a performance. And also, even from a user perspective, it makes like a tab grid very busy. You can't navigate through your tabs. You can't find your tabs if they are randomly placed. So we had to look at that problem. And you know what we did? We actually interviewed users many times. Like we did a lot of rounds of trying to understand the relationship. I really want to say the word relationship between people and their tabs. The reason why I say relationship, because I discovered through those connections and those conversations with users that there is a close connection and relationship between users and the product. Like people are, don't touch my tabs. Don't even dare closing tabs on my behalf. Like they will be crazy. Some would hate you. They will go away and find another product if you touch their tabs. So that's one thing that we realized out of conversation. The other thing is that people sometimes felt frustrated or lost, or even a need to apologize that they have so many tabs open. So there was an emotional connection that we needed to solve for. And instead of just coming up with whatever functional solution, like you can compress tabs, thumbnail, or whatever, we spent and took that time to understand those bases. So we come up with a feature called inactive tabs. So inactive tabs is just that tab group that is placed in the tab grid where every tab that was not visited for more than 21 days is just placed there. And the result is crazy because at the same time you're having a cleaner tab grid, like you only see the things that are active for more than 20 days, which is enough, by the way. Anything before 21 days is just like a forgotten, but also it's there. People won't start blaming you for closing their tabs. They know, and you maintain that relation of trust with them. So they know that their tabs are secure there. If they want to close it, of course they can, and they are highly encouraged to. But if they don't, We want to do anything. And the reason why I'm sharing this example is because I told you about this human being are those who's going to take care of the emotional part, because I'm sure AI still, at least for now, cannot get so deep into this kind of conversation and identify this relationship or these emotional needs as we as human being can do with our human skills.
How about opportunities with which the new delight factors would merge out? For example, we have now AR, VR. So, as both of us wear glasses, there's a possibility at some point that I would like to have the Ray-Ban glasses and just try how I can see the world through it. How do you see the delight factors emerging through these new technologies as well?
I think there is opportunity to place a delight in almost any technology coming these days, because it should not be only technology, otherwise we don't necessarily want to relate to. For example, I mean, when I spoke earlier about emotional needs, and there are two types of emotional need. There's the personal emotional need, and there's the social emotional needs. Let me explain. The personal emotional needs is what user want to feel while using the product. You want to feel relaxed, you want to feel secure, you want to feel whatever. The social emotional need is what people want others to feel about them while using the product. You mentioned the Ray-Ban eyeglasses, you mentioned like the Apple headset these days that people are even proud showing, because people sometimes use a product because they want to have a social proof. And it's lovely. Like I've heard a lot of people using Spotify because they want to be part of the movement. They want to be part of the community. It's not necessarily for the Spotify, only for the Spotify, but also for the community. So whether it's VR, whatever other technology, it's really important to service on these two areas. How can I make people feel good while using the product? And how can I make them feel so good that they want to share it and show it to the world and be proud of showing it? So I think these are the two areas that need to be highly implemented in whatever new or old technology nowadays.
Thank you so much, Nesrine. I think this has been wonderful. So we ask this one question to every guest of ours is how can our audience reach out to you?
Yes, oh, they can reach out on my website, nesrine-shangel.com, sorry. And they can also reach out on LinkedIn. I love being connected on LinkedIn. I do have a Substack newsletter. Actually, I started it a couple of months ago, where I share delight stories. So every week I try to share content, but also some nice experience that I live, and I love sharing those for inspiration. And there's something that recently started that I love, where as soon as I started talking about delight, people are reaching out on private message, sharing their delightful stories, like either personal or professional. It's like, hey, Nasreen, I know you are so passionate about the topic. This is what happened to me with product X or with product Y or Z. And I love these stories. Honestly, like this is just enriching me and also consolidating my thoughts. So of course, if you have any delightful story you want to chat or you want to share, keep going, like keep sharing those delightful stories. If of course they want me helping implementing that into their organization, whatever, this is also that I love doing as well. So happy to be in touch.
Just so for our users, then yes, please do share your delight stories with Nazreen. And yeah, there's one more thing, Nazreen. I think you're missing, and that's the book, the Product Delight book that's coming out on September 23rd. Yes, grab your copy of the book. It's an amazing book. It's got some nice bestest reviews from industry stalwarts. I think, yes, everyone have recommended Nisreen. So yes, get your copy and share your feedback.
Yes, thank you. So the book is going to be available on Amazon starting September 23rd. People can start have a look. It's available on productdelightbook.com. They can have a look on some of the structure. They can even have a free first chapter by signing up for early access. So yeah, and of course I would love to get people's feedback, because the way how I wrote the book is a storybook. Product storybooks. The start of the writing started as I want to write all my product stories and delightful stories and then turn it into some.
Yes, and I think Martin's written a wonderful review of the book. There's Marty Kagan, who's also reviewed the book. Matt Lee may, oh my goodness, I think those are the best recommendations anyone in product can get. So congratulations. We're all very excited.
Thank you so much. And thanks for having me today. I'm excited as well for whatever coming up, and I would love to keep going.
Super. Thank you, Nesrine. So it has been a pleasure having you on. And thank you for sharing your story. So many case studies about delight. And for our audience, stay curious, stay connected, and always keep building what matters.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Nisreen.